Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
It is the mission of the Louisiana Department of Natural Resources to promote and ensure the responsible and sustainable use of our state's natural resources. We'll visit with Jason Lanclos of DNR when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Louisiana businesses, by partnering with your local community and technical college foundation, you're guaranteed a skilled, highly competent workforce, homegrown talent, trained specifically to meet your needs, whatever those needs are. Visit this website to learn more about how to partner with your local Louisiana Community and Technical College Foundation. To better prepare for tomorrow, become a partner today.
Louisiana has over 26,000 licensed companies that do business legally and meet the needs of our state. Before selecting a contractor, check references and verify the license at lacontractor.org. It's your money, make wise decisions, and protect yourself from being scammed.
Growing up in Baton Rouge, I used to always pass up ExxonMobil, but I never thought that I would actually have the opportunity to get on. But what I thought was impossible turned out to be possible. So I just feel like it's just a wonderful opportunity to be able to provide for my family.
We are committed to being a community partner. We are actively working to recruit the talent here in Baton Rouge, and we want to bring them into our workforce. We're ready.
Protect yourself from the headaches of dealing with a non-licensed contractor. Go to lacontractor.org and make sure the person or company who wants to work for you is licensed by the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. It's your money. Make wise decisions and protect yourself.
For 8 seconds in the arena before an afternoon in the field. For a promise to students that honors success in the classroom. For championships earned on the bayou. For innovators committed to reclaiming our coastline. The Universities of Louisiana. For your future. For our future.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Jason Lanclos of the Department of Natural Resources is our guest. Buddy, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here. This is exciting.
Glad to have you here too. You and I have gotten to know each other a little bit over the last 5 or 6 months, and I am fascinated by the work that the department is doing and some of the stuff that you are specifically doing, and we'll dive into that as we go along. We always start, Jason, with background for our guests. Talk a little bit about your education, your work history, your family. Tell us who you are.
Sure. So Jason Lanclos grew up in a small town called Opelousas, Louisiana, west of here, about an hour. Went to Louisiana State University, graduated at Civil and Environmental Engineering. Spent some time working for a large consulting firm, traveled all over the place. That firm is now called AECOM, so did environmental consulting, structural, water, you name it. Lots of business and energy work all over the United States, which was a great exposure. Did a lot of work in plants, did a lot of work in just helping companies kind of look at how they would manage their long-term permitting stuff. And so the exciting thing is I came over to a state agency called CPRA in 2011. Did not think that would happen just because government was kind of new. It wasn't something that I expected to develop a career in, but started working in coastal and really got just a life lesson in what's going on in politics and in Louisiana and in climate, and just an unbelievable experience that kind of painted a picture that that state agencies are actually doing some really, really good work, and that you could be passionate about something and bring technical expertise and skills to a position. And was fortunate enough to transition back over into more of my background, which is in energy work. And I've been with the Department of Natural Resources since 2018. So I've been there a little over 3 years, and just couldn't really not have transitioned to an area like that in any better time. It's an exciting time to be there. And Tim, you asked about family as well. So I have my wife, Susan. We have 3 kids. I have a daughter who's going to be a senior at St. Joseph's, a freshman. That's Claire. And then my son, Grant's going to be in 6th grade at Our Lady of Mercy. So we stay very active with them. It's never dull around the house. And so a lot going on at work, a lot going on at home. Active family,
active career. There are so many good things going on at the State Department of Natural Resources that I want to jump into. But I think, Jason, that it's fair to say that most of our viewers probably very aware of the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality, probably somewhat aware of what goes on at the Louisiana Department of Economic Development, maybe not so much so at DNR. Talk briefly about the mission of the organization.
Sure. So DNR, our Department of Natural Resources, we are in charge of looking and regulating and managing the state's resources. So we have this wonderful ecosystem in South Louisiana and North Louisiana. And so the permitting, when energy companies want to do well drilling permits or want to do a permit in the coastal zone and working with CPRA, they would go to the Office of Coastal Management. If you want to do an oil and gas drilling permit, you would work with our Office of Coastal, actually Steve Zlee's group, the Office of Injection and Mining. So we do a full suite of permitting, lots of different analysis. We have a great group of folks that really care about the state's resources, and I think they're avid hunters and fishermen, and they just appreciate, I think, what they bring to the table, and they take pride in working in Louisiana and being able to protect those state's resources.
I mentioned it in the open. It's the protection and sustainability of our state's natural resources that the office focuses on. Now, you have a specific role that I think is very interesting within the department, and that is the State Energy Office, and you're sort of looking at energy transition, outreach, education. Talk specifically about your role, Jason.
Sure. So the Energy Office, Tim, it's not a large office, but I work directly for Secretary Tom Harris, who's the cabinet level secretary of DNR. And that office, our mission is really to help companies to look at a long-term plan for energy transition. So what that means is that we've had this wonderful history of generating energy predominantly through oil and gas drilling in Louisiana. We have been specifically focused on trying to look at ways to make sure that we're looking toward the future. I think that a lot of times we focus very heavily on fiscal cycles where, you get funding for a certain amount of years and you kind of plan your policies and your plans based on when that funding is. We have a really unique situation where we partner with the Department of Energy. So we're a federally funded group, but we do a lot of work to try to bring a lot of those lessons and a lot of the things that they're doing nationally to companies here. And what's so exciting is that it gives us day-to-day operations where we can work with them on transition. We get to work with some of the latest technologies. We get to look at things that potentially make Louisiana be able to pivot and be in a position where we can be economically and viable, in the future, which is what we all want.
You mentioned your boss, our mutual friend, Secretary Tom Harris, who oversees the Department of Natural Resources. And I've come to appreciate his approach to what he does. He's a man who is very serious about the state's natural resources. He's very serious about the state's oil and gas industry. But at the same time, he's had the vision to begin to look at this transition. Talk about your working relationship with the Secretary.
So Tim, Tom has been just a tremendous asset for me just because I think that, my background was in energy. I worked in plants for a number of years and really saw firsthand on what it takes for us to be a leader in manufacturing. And Louisiana has just these tremendous resources. We lead in a lot of plastics production. We lead in a lot of the energy production, and we make products that the world uses every day. And we do it in a manner that we're looking at in the long term to try to make sure that we can do these things because that supports our economy. But we also have to look at, what effects on the environment. How do we look at, overall CO2 outputs? And I think that when we started the work and we started working on the climate task force, Tom and I had a lot of conversations about, just how do we look at this? How do we make sure that Louisiana is making the right decisions in the long term? When you look at states that have really kind of isolated their energy source to one particular fuel source, they get into trouble because, if something happens or if there's a viability of that resource, they struggle to make sure that the workforce survives and not others. So we really want to make sure that we're transitioning and doing things that position us so we can be successful in the long term.
Well, and that's exactly what's taking place. You understand clearly how critically important the protection of Louisiana's oil and gas industry is while you look for the future and where we're headed. And those are the things we're going to talk about when we come back from this break. We're visiting with Jason Lanclos. He is with the Department of Natural Resources, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Shell, the rhythm of Louisiana.
As humankind faces its most critical challenges yet, the world demands leaders, and LSU is taking up the charge. The research we do here goes everywhere to protect communities threatened by climate change, so you can live your life with fewer worries about tomorrow. we're formulating a better way for everyone. Because at LSU, our calling is humanity.
Plants would not be operating if they weren't operating under the regulations to keep everybody safe and keep the environment safe.
It also goes back to the end products that our raw materials go into.
Solar panels,
windmills,
reusable bottles. Primary product is acrylonitrile, which is used to make carbon fiber.
Carbon fiber in an airplane is used to make it lighter.
By reducing weight, we indirectly help the environment because it uses less fuel. And for us to make products that help reduce carbon footprint is a big deal.
Shell, the rhythm of Louisiana.
So, how can I help you today?
Maybe you're looking for a bigger home. Maybe you have plans to grow your business. Or maybe all your plans have just changed. For the better. Whether you're planning for the future or just looking for a bank that cares about you. If you have a goal, let's make it happen.
This is what you're looking for.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Jason Lanclos of the Louisiana Department of Natural Resources is our guest. You mentioned in the last segment specifically your work and the department's work on the Governor's Climate Initiative Task Force. Tell our audience, Jason, a little bit more about the purpose of that task force and what the results have been.
Sure. So the Climate Initiatives Task Force, I was Tom's designee on the task force, and it brought together industry groups, NGOs, interested parties, folks who are just involved with day-to-day operations for long-term planning and resource management. And I think that what it did was create a lot of open conversations. Obviously, when you have a very diverse group of stakeholders, everybody doesn't always agree, but I think what ended up happening so well is that we got a lot of really good ideas, and we all agreed that change needs to be made. We need to look toward the long term, and I think that at the end of the day, what that meant for us is that that mission that we talked about in the first segment is critical, and we need to make sure that we're approaching and making decisions with our long-term goals in mind. And I think that when you look at how important industry is in Louisiana, transition is imminent, and I think that we have a very dynamic, diverse makeup. When you look at Louisiana specifically, we have emissions that really are about 200 million metric tons of carbon dioxide per year. So a lot of that, about 60%, comes from our industrial sources. So it's a challenging makeup because a lot of these industrial sources, they're making products that we use every day and ship all over the world. And energy, as we've seen so recently, is so important. And we're helping a lot of our other countries to ship LNG. So trying to work with industry to try to make those industries more environmentally sustainable, trying to reduce their CO2 footprints. It really forced us to trying to look at an all hands on deck or a comprehensive approach to energy. So in other words, not really ruling out sources, but trying to make sure that we're really being good stewards with the sources that we do have. So looking for leaks, working on methane, making sure that producers are doing the right thing and being environmentally responsible. And I think that when you start to look at this, the thing that's exciting is a lot of times you can have task forces and you can put policies in place, and they're really not very well received, or you don't have a lot of people who are working that really want to adopt them. The thing that's exciting is that when you bring different parties together, people had a sense of wanting to work together and wanting to find solutions. And I think that makes our work easier at the end of the day when you have kind of that appetite to say that, hey, look, we need to do some good things. And what it did for us is helped us to identify some key pillars. And we'll talk more, I'm sure, about those. But I mean, things like solar energy, offshore wind energy, that development, we have such tremendous potential in that. We'll talk more about hydrogen and also about carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Those are things that we see as critical pieces to be able to solve a lot of these challenges. And again, Louisiana's dynamic makeup, getting to a renewable state like some of the other states in the nation have tremendous wind resources that they can get to an 80 or 90% adoption of renewable resources. They can do it because they have the resource. For us in Louisiana, our wind resource is good, but it's not fantastic. So in other words, we're going to develop it. It's going to be a very, very good industry for us, but it can't completely take the place of what we're doing right now in terms of fossil fuels. So we have to have a blend of different resources to try to make all those things work together. So again, having everyone at the table trying to work together toward those same goals is extremely important.
So one of the things that I know came out of the Governor's Climate Initiative Task Force was this whole idea of going net carbon neutral by 2050. You've also seen a lot of major oil and gas companies like Shell and ExxonMobil and others be leaders in that space as well. First question is it possible for Louisiana to get to net carbon neutral by 2050? And if so, how do we do it?
Sure. Tim, I'd love to tell you that it's possible and it's easy. The reality is that it's possible, but it's going to be difficult. It requires a lot of capital. It requires some very, very difficult changes. But again, I think that right now the momentum is there. The companies who are producing our energy and who are producing products want to get to that. They're starting to see that there are markets that it's being driven by the market. It's being driven by consumers.
It's been driven by their investors.
That's exactly right. So they're making those decisions and they're investing in the technologies that we see as having a lot of promise. The reality is that I think that everybody wants to get to a greener, we don't like to use colors, but green gets thrown around a whole lot. It takes some time for us to be able to do that. We want to do that, but it has to kind of occur in a stair-step approach. We have to do it very proactively. Companies have to invest a lot of resources. And again, it's going to take time to develop those resources. Just to give you just one example, the offshore wind industry on the East Coast, which is now becoming very prolific around Block Island and that area, that took almost 10 years to get off the ground. They have a tremendous resource. They have high wind speeds. They have a lot of production, but they didn't have the port infrastructure. They didn't have the workers. They didn't have a lot of the things that we have in South Louisiana that we think is going to enable that industry to really take off a lot quicker than it did on the East Coast. So you'll see things like our Gulf Island fabrication and a lot of the design consultants that we have that design these very, very complicated foundations. We can build structures in the Gulf. We can fabricate structures very well. We have the port infrastructure. We have the expertise. So when that industry does take off and we get the permitting guidance from BOEM and others to start doing wide-scale leasing, we think that industry is going to be fantastic. And what that does is once we start slowly replacing and slowly boosting up our renewable portfolio, companies can start using that renewable power to make products. So that's when we start to make that transition. But again, those things take time and we have to do major investments in order to get there.
We got about 45 seconds left in this segment, and I want to make sure that we spend some time in segment 3 talking about Louisiana as a hydrogen hub and specifically about carbon capture and sequestration. But we have been such a traditional oil and gas state, right, that sometimes it's a little bit difficult for us as a population to have these conversations. But Governor Edwards has shown some real leadership in this space. Secretary Harris has shown some real leadership in this space, and you have as well. And I congratulate all of you for that. Let's take a break. We come back. We'll focus on carbon capture. We'll focus on Louisiana as a hydrogen hub. I know there's some good things going on there as well. We're visiting with Jason Lanclos. He's with the State Department of Natural Resources. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Jason Lanclos of DNR is my guest. We talked about major industry and the state moving to net carbon zero, net carbon neutral by 2050. A challenging goal. We know it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of engagement from a lot of people, a lot of resources. One of the ways we're going to do that is with a technology that's been around a lot longer than most people think it's been around, and that's carbon capture, carbon utilization, carbon sequestration. You are on the front lines for our state in that space, Jason. Talk to us about it. What does it mean? What's happening in Louisiana?
Sure. So Tim, when we talked about Louisiana's emission profile, we have this very unique mix of business and industry and a high emission output of carbon dioxide. So as we're navigating solutions to try to look at how to manage these resources or how to manage carbon dioxide in the long term, permanent sequestration of carbon dioxide has been happening for many, many years. We have industry that has been sequestering many different products, and we've been injecting things under the Earth's surface for probably 50 or 60 years very successfully. So what permanent sequestration is that we have aquifers in Louisiana that are very salty, that are not usable for drinking water or really for any other use, that are located, sometimes a mile and even a mile and a half under our surfaces. They're very unique resources, they're very large resources, but they're also perfect storage reservoirs for injecting carbon into, because over time, that carbon reacts with the salt water. You have a cap rock on top or a very, very coarse clay that's on top of those areas. And so it becomes permanently part of that formation. So it gives us an opportunity to be able to store it. It almost becomes inert after a couple of years. We can do it safely, we can do it effectively. There's a whole program that's designed specifically to do that safely and effectively, and that's called Class 6 permitting, and that's through the Environmental Protection Agency. The Louisiana DNR has been a leader in getting regulatory primacy from EPA. We will be the third state that gets regulatory primacy. We've been working very closely with EPA to put that in motion. We have been doing a lot of work to do the analyses to make sure that we have the personnel, the people, the safety protocols in place. We've added 6 additional people who are working specifically on carbon management. Our permitting team has just done leaps and bounds. They've been doing a fantastic job of just getting ready so that we understand how to manage these resources. And I think that at the end of the day, we want this to be a solution. We know that it's not the only solution. It's not going to get us out of our emission problem, but it has to be part of the overall structure in terms of how we decarbonize in Louisiana. Again, it's a very challenging thing that we have to do, and this is one of the things that holds a lot of promise.
Well, it shows, I think, great confidence in the work that you and the team have done, that our state is willing to have the conversation now. I'm not sure we could have had this conversation 5 years ago, right? About moving to these alternative forms of energy, about going toward net carbon zero by 2050. All of these things, great advancements in terms of what's going on in Louisiana. Another very exciting thing that's happening is Louisiana has signed an agreement with Arkansas and Oklahoma to create this hydrogen hub. What does that mean?
Sure. So a hub, Tim, we need about another 4 segments to talk about a hub, but I'll condense it very, very quickly. So a hub, we've been working on hydrogen and on widespread development of hydrogen production for a number of years. And our Department of Energy has been fantastic in putting out this solicitation to really award anywhere from 4 to 8 hubs. And for us, a hub is just really, it brings together resources, people, companies, all these different organizations together to really kind of put a flag down and say that we want this area to kind of be an epicenter for production, use, transportation, mobility applications, everything hydrogen. We've got these tremendous resources. We have pipelines that already transport hydrogen across the state. We have new developments that are happening in Ascension Parish that are going to produce hydrogen. And the reason why that's so important is that hydrogen can bring so many different things to the table. It can be used as a fuel source. It can be blended into a lot of different things in a lot of different industrial applications and even in power applications. And what it does is it dramatically reduces CO2 output when it's blended with natural gas. So I think that for us, we see hydrogen as just a tremendous opportunity for the state to advance just on our overall emission cutting profile, but it also gives us an opportunity to produce products, to be able to produce green products. And then at the end of the day, we can start to move toward where we're trying to all go, which is to create an environment where kids have opportunities to go into education where they can pursue chemical engineering degrees or other degrees and work in some of these exciting fields. I mean, these are things when you look at offshore wind platforms that produce green hydrogen that have electrolyzers located on them. Those are exciting things that can really change the dynamic of how we produce energy and how we produce products in our state. And what's so exciting about this partnership is that if you ever listen to Governor Hutchinson in Arkansas and Governor Stitt in Oklahoma, their approaches to energy are very similar to what Governor Edwards has said many times, which is we're a very comprehensive state. We don't want to eliminate any fuel sources. We want to make them. It's, let's bring them all in. Let's try to make sure that we're doing the right thing. We're doing it in an environmentally sustainable manner, but let's try to be the best at each one of those sources. And I think that with hydrogen, this gives us such a unique opportunity to work together. It's bipartisan. You have governors who are from other states with similar energy backgrounds. We have companies that are located here like Walmart, J.B. Hunt in Arkansas. We have these great manufacturers in Oklahoma. They're already leaders in wind energy. So we have all those components that are coming together in this three-state resource that we think is just going to really set the standard for how hydrogen is produced across the country.
It's going to be really fun to watch how that plays out over the course of the next couple of years. We got about 40 seconds left here. I know that community is critically important to you and to Secretary Harris. Briefly, your message to Louisiana and to the communities that are so impacted by this energy transition.
Absolutely. As someone, Tim, we flooded in 2016, and climate is essential in my mind. And I think that, we have to remember that each one of these projects, each one of these things that we're working on has a direct community impact. So the more that we can educate folks and let them know of what we're doing, why we're doing it, that we're trying to do the right thing, that these things are, good things for the state, and that companies are helping us to navigate through this. We're trying to navigate through the policies. We want to make Louisiana a very successful state so they can have a very bustling economy and so that kids have a resource and careers that they can go into in the future.
It's an all of the above type of approach to energy in our state. It's been a great pleasure to have you on the show. It's been a great pleasure to work with you. The state's lucky to have you in the position you're in. Keep up the good work, brother.
Thank you, Tim. It's fantastic.
That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.